All right, so we have two possibilities for this morning. We'll see what we get through. Meaning the main one is the death of Rachel sheet that you have. But there was one that I was ready with last week in case we didn't have time. But in case we had time, I should say. But we didn't do. And that's the question of whether Lavan is right. About who's supposed to get married first, Rachel or Leah. So we can come back to that at the end because there's some pretty surprising stuff on that. The answer is not necessarily what one would have. Well, the answer is not what I expected at any rate. The answer is Lavan is right. So that's a whole right. That's we'll see if we get to that. Great.
I really want to get to that.
Okay. So let's see what happens.
I know, but you got it very close to age.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not really.
Maybe we'll get to it, and we'll see. There's more to be said. But first, I wanted to talk about you see in the subject line here, the death of Rachel, the wife of Pinchas, and Michal. And this is not like one of those overarching shiurim like we did like last week with Yaakov's masks and all of that. This is a very narrow point, but I think it gives us a sort of a different perspective on who Rachel is and what happens when she passes away. The story itself is a bizarre story, right? I mean, Rachel's death is painful. I mean, death is painful in general, but like the story of the love of Yaakov and Rachel and the sort of tempestuous back and forth. She can't have children, and then Bilhah, and then Yosef is born. Like she names Yosef, not throwing any shade on anyone who names their child Yosef, but there you go. But she names her child God, give me another one, right? I mean, a lot of the names. There you go. A lot of the names in that family are strange, and you sort of wonder what the kids think while they're growing up. Shimon, God has heard my suffering, is not exactly also what one wants to, Ben-Oni, whether Binyamin and Ben-Oni are different or not, well, we can talk about it. It's definitely an odd piece of her death. But it's, you feel like the story's cut short. Like, it's just like, this story of Yaakov and Rachel should have had more chapters. And it doesn't. The story just kind of stops when she dies. So that's one facet of the death of Rachel. It's also very confusing because you wonder why it happened. Meaning, death in Chumash is so often a divine act, as opposed to just, they reached the point where they had to die. Like we talked about this, I think we mentioned it, with Abraham, the idea that he actually was supposed to live another 5 years, but that God takes his life 5 years early, so he won't see Esav go off and do the stuff that he's going to do. So many deaths biblically are punishment. So certainly when you see Rachel die young like this, the Mefarshim feel a need to say, why did this happen, right? Among the answers, why does Rachel die? Two different answers. Good. So one answer is, as Alita says, the Trafim, right? She stole the Trafim from her father. We're going to come back to that story. But Yaakov says, whoever has them, right, whoever it's found with is going to die. So that ends up happening. And then Dina points out the other classic explanation that's offered is that Yaakov is married to two sisters. That's not allowed. And since he is coming back into Israel, so now he's bound by, in some sense, the laws of the Torah. Why he wouldn't be bound by the laws of the Torah outside of Israel is a really good question. But since Rachel was the second one, therefore she has to die. And that way Yaakov will not be married to two sisters. Of course, that answer is so strange.
Yeah, because why doesn't he die?
Right, if he dies, he won't be married to two sisters. Right, no, in all seriousness. Like, he can solve the problem that way. We do have precedent for the idea that mitzvahs are, in a sense, more binding in Israel than elsewhere. There's a sifra that comments that the reason why you do mitzvahs outside of Israel is so that when you come back, they will be familiar to you. Suggesting that what you're doing outside of Israel is practice. which doesn't mean that a person can say, well, therefore I don't really need them. That's not a good idea. But it reflects a certain perspective about the binding character of mitzvos in Israel. But to suggest really that among the avos and imahos who are not bound by the mitzvos, whether they observe them is a separate point, but they're not bound by them. To suggest that would have led to Rachel's death is very difficult. The usual answer is the one that Bereshis Rabbah gives, which is Yaakov saying whoever has the Trofim is going to die, and therefore she dies. But the whole thing is very strange and very difficult. To see the life of Rachel cut short like that is a very painful thing. And then, yes, you also have, as Alina noted, the renaming of Binyamin, right? Which you could take in a lot of different ways. Ben Oni, the name that Rachel gives him, means what?
Son of my suffering.
Son of my suffering, or it could be one of two things. Son of my suffering, or son of my son of my why? Son of my strength. Son of my strength. Right? The bracha that Reuven gets is Kochi Bereshis Oni. As Yaakov says, the first of my strength. So Ben Oni is either son of my suffering or son of my strength, and it could also be son of my sin, because Av and Aleph Vav Nun is indeed corruption or sin. And then, after his beloved wife, who he loved more than anything, has passed away, Yaakov says, I think I'm going to call him Binyamin. Which, no, you can't do that. That was her dying statement, was to name him, Ben Oni. How could you do that? And he does it anyway. Right, so if Ben Oni means son of my strength, then Ben Yamin is sort of like it, but he doesn't want him to think of his wife's death maybe when he... The story is there are so many different aspects to it that are difficult. So one note that I want to pick up on in all of this, because we're not really going to talk about any of the things that we just did as the introduction, but if you take a look at source number 1, an odd grouping created by Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah. Shlosha hein sheniskashu b'sha'as leidasan. There were 3 who had difficulty, I translated as koshi. They had a hard time giving birth. Umesu kashein chayos, and they died while in labor. Ve'elu hein, and these are the 3, Rachel, ve'eshes Pinchas, and Michal bas Shaul. Now, Eshes Pinchas doesn't mean Pinchas the Kohen, Navi, forerunner of Eliyahu, whatever. That's not the Pinchas we're talking about. We're talking about Pinchas, who's very different, of Chafni and Pinchas. So we're going to talk more about the story, but they are the sons of Eli, who is the Kohen Gadol, who is the Shofet, the one who has the whole interaction with Hannah. And his sons, Chafni and Pinchas, they run the Mishkan and basically, almost run the Mishkan into the ground. They abuse their power as Kohanim in the Mishkan. They take advantage of the population for their own enrichment. We'll talk about that. And one of them, Pinchas, has a wife who is never named in Tanakh. We don't know what her name was. We just know she is the wife of Pinchas, daughter-in-law of Eli. And she dies in childbirth, as we're going to see. And then Michal, daughter of Shaul, is the 3rd one in the set. We don't know that from the text of Tanakh. We know that through a Gemara. So it's a really odd collection. And that's really all this Medrash does, yeah?
Well, there must be other women who died during childbirth.
That are recorded in Tanakh, just these 3. Michal is not recorded in Tanakh, but the Gemara reads it into a pasuk in Tanakh. But no, these are the 3 that we have. But the Medrash doesn't make a point of it. In other words, it says, these are the 3. It brings you the psukim. It brings you a little bit of the Medrash that shows that Michal bat Shaul dies in childbirth. And that's it.
So why are they highlighting it?
Yeah. What does it want to teach us? What is this, okay, a set of 3. That's nice. And now what?
Well, they do that a lot. Sets of Medrash, there's a lot of sets of...
It certainly does, but generally there's a lesson to be learned. That's what I'm saying. When the Medrash does this, it's because it wants us to draw some kind of conclusion. And I don't know what, because their circumstances, as we're going to see, are wildly different. I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot now and say what we learned from this collection of 3, because there's nothing you can do with it. But looking at the stories, we might get a sense.
Maybe their husband said something wrong.
Maybe their husbands did something wrong. So, no, because Pinchas, it's true.
And you were saying Yaakov also, like, I don't know if either he married two wives or whatever.
Married two sisters, right? Michal, yeah, what did Michal's husband is David.
She said that he danced inappropriately.
In front of, but she's wrong. Right? She's wrong for saying that. She gets criticized for that, as we're going to see. So maybe it's women who criticize their husbands. Oh boy, I hadn't thought of that. But the wife of Pinchas, we don't have any dialogue between her and her husband. We don't know anything about their relationship. There's nothing there for us to work with.
Well, it's also interesting that Michal is described as the daughter of and not the wife of.
Right, but that's the way she is in Tanakh. Right, even when she marries David, it's because of the deal that Shaul made. Right, it's all surrounding Shaul that Michal gets identified. But you're right, it is kind of funny that we call her that. Eshet Pinchas we understand because we don't know her name. But Michal being daughter of Shaul, you're right, it is an interesting thing. I'm not sure what to do with it, but it is an interesting point. So let's take a look at their stories and see what we can get. So the first part, we go through Rachel briefly, because this is the story that I expect is most familiar. Source number 2, I've collected for you a few psukim just that are key for the immediately preceding event. What happens right before her death? And of course that is the flight from Lavan's house, and as we've already noted, the theft of his trafim. V'Lavan halach ligzos est sono. Lavan had gone to shear his sheep. V'tignov Rachel es hatrafim asher li'aviha, and Rachel stole the trafim that belonged to her father. Side note: what are trafim?
Idols.
Ooh, idols. How do you know that? What made you think that trafim are idols? Because that's what they told us.
I know there's so much that we don't remember.
So the answer is the next pasuk on your sheet. When Lavan is speaking to Yaakov and accusing him of the theft, Ve'ata halo halachta, now you have left, ki nichsafta lebeis avicha, because you miss your home. Lama ganata es Elohai, why have you stolen my? And I wrote in brackets afterwards that no, this is not Shemos. This is Chol. It's a reference to Avodah Zarah. Why, or Avodah Zarah, or something else? But why have you stolen my gods? That's the way that they're translating it to render them as gods. What's the problem with assuming that these are Avodah Zarah? There are a couple of problems.
Well, I'm surprised she's worshipping Avodah Zarah. He was told to go marry someone from that family.
Right. That's a good point. Like, why did you send them to Laban's house? Right? If Laban is an idolater, okay.
Also, maybe you shouldn't own a Avodah Zarah. Rachel's taking them.
Yeah.
It's dangerous.
Since when do we steal people's idols? And if you're going to tell me the classic explanation, she took them in order to wean her father from it, as Rashi says, right? Then why didn't she ditch them? They ran away for 3 days. She didn't dump them by the side of the road, right? She's hanging on to them. There's something very odd in this story, if these are actually Avodah Zarah. Not to mention, later on, in a story involving David HaMelech, of all people, he's going to have trafim.
That's why we call that.
So I thought, like, oh, maybe that's the connection here, right? But the problem is that we have no trafim for Eshet Pinchas. It doesn't work. But take a look at number 3, where I show you the use of trafim in Tanakh. The earliest reference after this story is in the end of Shoftim, the story of the idol of Micha. Micha is a Jewish fellow who, long story, sets up a little bit of a quasi-idolatrous temple for himself in his house. And he creates for it a phod and trafim, which could make it Avodah Zarah. If he has an idol, then that could be what they are. The problem is it's not so clear that story is a story of Avodah Zarah. I'll actually mention to you, in case anyone is around, on Tuesday, December 25th, my Beit Midrash is going to be doing a day-long Tanakh program. Last year we did Tanakh in a day. So this year we're doing 10 heroes and 10 villains. 30-minute shiurim on as it sounds, 10 heroes and 10 villains from Tanakh, starting at 9 a.m., running till 9 p.m. Ice cream CM at the end. So that'll be, you'll get information. I'll send you a flyer. Don't worry. But Micha is going to be one of our villains. But the title of his shir is Micha. He meant well, because he did. It's such a strange story. Sorry? No, they didn't get there. They didn't get there. This is the part of Shoftim we didn't get to. Right. But that's the first use. Then we get them in Shmuel Aleph, where Shmuel is berating Shaul, and he talks about Trafim in a way that sounds like it's sorcery, not Avodah Zarah. And then the strangest of stories, this one of the stories where David escapes from Shaul. Shaul wants to kill him. David is home with Michal, finds out that Shaul wants to kill him. Michal saves his life. She lets him out via the window and puts the Trafim, which apparently have some kind of a human form, in the bed. Right? Think like jailbreaks and stuff, right? Puts the Trafim in the bed so that the Shaul's men, when they look inside, think that David is in the bed and don't realize that they should go pursuing him. So there you have to ask yourself, if these are really idols, why did David and Michal have Trafim? Right? That doesn't make any sense. And then I give you a few other examples of this later in Tanakh. But no, whatever these are, they're unlikely to be considered idols. What they seem to be instead, and this is Ibn Ezra's view, is that they are humanoid forms and they are supposed to predict the future. Like people back in the day thought they're going to use their Trafim in order to tell them what's going to happen in the future. Take a look at number 4, please, on the sheet. Yesh omrim shu klei nechoshes ha'asui l'das chelkei hashot. He says, some say these are clocks. They're made out of copper, and you use them in order to determine the units of hours. So you want to tell time, Trafim are clocks. That's an interesting explanation. But others say that there is power in astrology, that astrologers are able to do the following: to make a form which at particular times will speak. Where do you get that from? And he quotes you a pasuk in Zechariah, which say the Trafim speak corruption, or they speak falsely. He says, I don't think that's right either. Upirish pasuk in Enukain. That's not what the pasuk means. He says, I think that they are human forms. And they are made to receive powers from above. And I can't explain what that means. He says, I'll prove it to you. Look at the Trafim that Michal put in the bed. So he says that shows that these are human forms, and they're meant to convey some kind of supernatural information, and that's what she stole from her father. Well, that just leads to the question, so what was she stealing? Why did she take them? So Radak says that it's not about weaning her father from Avodah Zarah. Rather, she's afraid her father's going to find out that they ran away.
He wouldn't see otherwise.
Right, he wouldn't know otherwise that they were gone. Right, he comes home and the Trafim, he's going to say to the Trafim something, I don't know what, and the Trafim are going to inform him that actually they all fled.
So why couldn't she just throw them out? Why continue to...
Right, that's the problem, is then why didn't she throw them out? Why is she keeping them? The answer may be...
Yeah, what are you saying? So they really have power?
Right.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
They really spoke about crystal walls.
They're probably like little statues that are in museums, right?
They're not little. They're big.
They sound like a big doll.
Like they have...
Right, yes, she's having that.
But there were powers.
It's not
these kinds of things.
But wasn't the whole Avodah Zarah that you can't believe that they have power?
Correct. Unless you believe that their power is also divine. Meaning astrology, to everybody not named Rambam, in the time of the Rambam, and earlier going back to the Gemara, they believed that astrology was science. They didn't believe that there were some forces that are, acting against God or some other power or whatever it is. They believed that just like Hashem created the world with gravity and all the other forces that we can observe, there are influences from the stars and influences from the planets that, somehow will have an impact on life here in this world. The Rambam didn't believe it, but he didn't disbelieve it because he felt it's heresy. He just thought it was wrong. He thought it was factually incorrect. The same way he would disagree with, a physician who said something that he thought was medically wrong. It wasn't that he was offended by the idea. There was nothing theologically problematic about believing that there is this kind of strength, and therefore she has no reason to ditch it. Meaning, it's the right thing for us to do to flee. So therefore, I'm going to do whatever I can in order to ensure that we flee successfully, including I'm going to take that which he would have used to figure out that we were that we had left. That would be a way to take it. We're going to see more about this. I'm not done with the Trafim, but that's the basic aspect of the story, along with the last line in number 2. Im asher timtzas Elohecha, again, it's an idol. Lo yichya, or not an idol. If you take this view, I should explain that. If you take the view that these aren't idolatrous at all, they're just tools of prognostication, then the term here Elohecha or Elohai means powerful things. It doesn't mean God at all. In the same way that the Torah will use the word Aleph Lamed Hey Yud Mem to refer to judges. It doesn't just referring to God. It means a being who has power, some kind of ability. So that's the way that you would take it here. Yaakov says, wherever you find these trafim of yours, whoever has them, lo yichya, will not live. And of course, as the pasuk concludes, lo yada Yaakov ki Rachel genavasam. Yaakov doesn't know that Rachel has them. Had he known, he never would have said such a thing. So that's story number 1. That's Rachel's death. Is the Trafim fact, followed by her death, which seems to be associated with taking the Trafim as best as we can tell.
Is there any connection between this story and the one that we learned in Shoftim, also, who says a crazy thing and ends up being his daughter,
it certainly teaches us a little bit about language. Yes.
There's no connection, though. They don't know there's that.
I don't remember seeing a connection. That doesn't mean there is none. I don't remember seeing one.
Did they ever find the Trafim? Did Jacob ever know that Rachel had the Trafim when she
Good question.
died? They don't mention it after.
Right. I think I mentioned last week the question of whether Yaakov ever finds out that Yosef was sold.
He said he does.
Well, the brothers think he knows, and his bracha that he gives makes it sound like he knows, but there's no pasuk anywhere. There's no discussion of what that scene looked like.
No, and it says that.
But does Yaakov have any remorse that he said this? Does Yaakov have any?
Yeah, we don't know. What's his reaction? She dies, and he thinks, "Oh, this was my fault, wasn't it?" Because they go into her tent and he finds the trafim. Can you imagine? That would be horrific.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If the Trafim had real power, which in those days things did have, and we believe that, but how is that okay? It makes it like a middleman to God.
Is it? If this is really...
Where's the power coming from?
Right.
And then you're asking it questions.
So, I would point out that if you believe that this is nature, then you don't require that there be some, ability to explain it in order to justify using it.
Well,
right?
Astrology is more understandable because that seems more nature.
Right, but that's basically what they're drawing on. In other words, once you tie it into the mazalot, that's basically what you're doing.
Yeah, but I don't see it the same as the mazalot. It's much clearer that Hashem created astrology than this.
Understood. And we're going to come back to a source that seems to point to this being sort of towards idolatry. We'll see. It's not a clean story. It's not a story of he just had clocks and she took the clocks and that's all these were. This is not an innocent story. Is probably the better way for me to frame it. But again, we're going to come back to this because it's going to figure into the bond between the three stories. But we have only seen Rachel, and we still have Pinchas' wife and Michal bat Shaul, whose stories are less known. So Pinchas' wife. So the story right before her death is the decision to take the Aron to war. If you remember the beginning of Sefer Shmuel, Alina, sorry for the review. This is what we've been doing in the Shir at her house Thursday afternoons. But it's a little bit ahead of where we are in the Shir, so don't tell anybody. After Shmuel is born, after Shmuel is brought to the Mishkan, we find out that the Mishkan is being run by Chafni and Pinchas, the two sons of Eli. Eli is already much older. He passes away at the age of 98, and this is somewhere in the last decades of his life. So Chafni and Pinchas take over the Mishkan, and they are abusing it for themselves, for their own enrichment. So people bring a carbon, they go to the person who brought the carbon, and they say, we're going to take a portion for ourselves. And the person would say to them, this is the way it's described in Shmuel, the person would say to them, let us just put the part on the Mizbeach that's supposed to go there, and then you can take your Kohanim. And they said, no, we're taking first. And so they would take even before the Mizbeach got. And in so doing, it's not just that they are enriching themselves, but they are ruining the experience of those who come to get close to Hashem and bring karbanos, right? It turns the Mishkan into, just some, I don't even know what to call it, but the enrichment system for the house of Eli is really what this becomes. And in addition to that, it's the first case of many that would happen down through the centuries of Kohanim taking advantage of the system for their own enrichment. Right? When you think about what this does, this is a precedent, but it's the first one in a very long line, because all the Nevi'im, all the way down to Malachi in the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash, criticize the Kohanim for enriching themselves via the karbanos of the people and talk about how it cheapens the service of Hashem. There's a fascinating thing, which I'll take a second to point out, because I really like this point. What they do to the Mishkan, right, had already been predicted generations earlier. There was somebody who spoke to Moshe and Aaron and said to them, you're taking too much for yourselves. It's not right that your family has all of this power. And that was? It was Korach. That was Korach. His father-in-law was the judging issue, but it wasn't about enrichment. Korach alleged, you guys are taking too much. Korach's great-grandson is Shmuel. And Shmuel is the one who brings the message saying that they've sinned and that they're going to be destroyed. Because Korach was wrong when he was talking to Moshe and Aaron, but the message was fundamentally accurate about the risks involved in kahuna. So that's its own story. But in terms of what happens in their day, there's a curse that comes on the house of Eli from Hashem, as communicated by Shmuel, and it starts to come true in a war with the Plishtim. The Jews have had trouble with the Plishtim at this point for generations. Go back to the story of Shimshon and earlier. So the Jews decide we're going to go to war against the Plishtim, and that's where you see source number 5. Right after the Jews decide to go to war with them. Vayarchu Plishtim likras Yisrael. The Plishtim arranged their armies to face the Jews. Vatitosh hamilchama. The war went terribly. Vayinagef Yisrael lifnei Plishtim. The Jews are struck before the Plishtim. Vayakuba ma'aracha basadek harbas alafim ish. They lose like 4,000 people in the war. A tremendous loss. So they come back to the camp. And the elders said, why were we defeated today before the Plishtim? Nikha elenu mishilo as Aron bris Hashem. I know. Let's go to Shiloh. Let's get the Aron. It will come into our midst and it will save us from our enemies. So they send for Shiloh, and they take the Aron from there, the Aron Bris Hashem Tzvakos Yoshev HaKeruvim, the Aron of God, who dwells on the Keruvim, which are, of course, on the Aron. And there you have Chafni and Pinchas. The Aron comes to the camp, we're at the end of the third line, Vayariu Kol Yisrael Truah Gedolah. Everyone's very excited, they blow their shofros, Vatehom Haaretz. The earth itself is thrown into confusion. Everyone's like, oh no, the Aron is here. Vayishmeu Plishtim es kol ha-truah. The Plishtim hear it. They hear the trumpeting. Vayomru, and they said, Ma kol ha-truah gedolah zos b'machaneh ha'ivrim. What is all this trumpeting going on? Vayed'u ki Aron Hashem bo'al ha'machaneh. And they knew that the Aron was there, and they panicked. I didn't bring the next pasuk, I should have. But the next pasuk talks about how the Plishtim are afraid when they see the Aron is there. They think, now we're really in trouble. But what are we going to do? We have to fight. And they go to fight, and look what happens. Vayilachamu Plishtim, the Plishtim fought. Vayinagef Yisrael, the Jews were struck once again. Vayanusu Ishla Halav, they fled back to their tents. And they lose this time, Shloshim Elef Ragli, 30,000 people, and the Aron and the sons of Eli, Chafni, and Pinchas. Word comes back to the camp. There's a runner in Ish Binyamin who brings the news back to the camp. And the wife of Pinchas finds out what happened. V'chalaso, the daughter-in-law of Eli, Eshes Pinchas, the wife of Pinchas, Hara Lalas, she has conceived, and now she's already ready to give birth. She's already towards the end of her pregnancy. V'tishma'es hashmu'ah, al hilakach Aron ha'elokim, and she heard the news that the Aron was taken. Umeis chamia v'isha, her father-in-law is dead, because Eli, when he hears the news about the death of his sons and the taking of the Aron, he falls back on his chair and he dies. So she hears her father-in-law is dead, she hears her husband is dead. She goes into labor and gives birth. And when she died, the women who were standing there with her, they spoke to her and they said, Al tiri'i, don't be afraid, kivein yaladet, you have given birth to a son. V'lo ansa v'lo shasa liba. She didn't answer. She didn't pay attention to them. V'tikra lanar I kavod. She names the kid I kavod. I kavod means?
No respect.
Lack of honor. Lack of honor. What do you mean? Lemor gala kavod mi Yisrael, because honor has been exiled from Israel because the Aron has been taken, and her father-in-law and her husband. And then she concludes. There's a lot of discussion about how to read these psukim. I'm just reading it in the most straightforward way. She concludes honor has been exiled from Israel because the Aron has been taken. Focus on loss of the Aron, and she names the kid I Kavod. That's the name in English. Not such a popular name now. Ichabod. Right. Ichabod is I Kavod.
Lack of respect.
Yeah. Not one of those that you want to use.
That's ridiculous almost, right? She had a priority street.
So she seems to be right. Her concern is the Aron. She's not concerned about her personal tragedy. She's concerned about the national one, and this is definitely pointed out.
Sounds like Ruth a little bit.
Sorry.
Sounds like Ruth a little bit.
In what sense?
And then she didn't worry about herself. Remember, she was doing it just for not Ruth. I'm talking about who wanted to have Shmuel's mother. Chana wanting a child so that she can have him. Right. So that's Pinchas' wife. That's our second story. Now let's go through the third story. The third story is the one that's hardest in the sense that it's not explicit in Tanakh. But we do have the following story, that what precedes the death of Michal bat Shaul as far as Tanakh is concerned, or precipitates it, is the story of David and the Aron. So in number 6, the Aron has been staying in the house of Obed Edom. And everyone there is prospering, it seems to be safe, and David said, let's bring the Aron to Ir David. And that's what's happening here in number 6. And there's a big parade. We're on the second line in number 6. Every 6 steps that they take with the Aron, they bring korbanos, and David is dancing with abandon, with all of his strength before God. And he's wearing a simple, plain linen garment. They're bringing the Aron up. There's a lot of trumpeting. We do the trumpeting thing with the Aron. It comes to Ir David. And Michal looks out the window. And she sees David dancing this way before God. And he is disgraced in her eyes, in her heart. Vayashav David levareches beiso. So David comes home. Levareches beiso could mean bracha, could mean to give gifts. Not clear. But Michal bat Shaul across David. Michal goes to see David. Vatomer, and she says sarcastically, "Manich bad hayom melech Yisrael. Oh, how honored you are today, King of Israel. Asher nigla hayom leinei am hos avadav, revealed before the eyes of the maidservants of his servants. Ki galos niglos achad harikim, like one of those empty people. Look at the way you were dancing in the street. What a disgrace." The subtext is, of course, since her father was the king, like that's the way a king behaves, not the way you behave. So David in one of the all-time harsh responses. V'yomer David al Michal, Lifnei Hashem asher bachar bi me'avicha u'mikol beiso. He says, you know who I was dancing for? For God, who chose me over your father and over his entire house. So there. L'tavoso sina gid alam Hashem, to make me the ruler over the nation of God, al Yisrael, v'sichakti lifnei Hashem. Sure I did this. It was in front of God. Unakalosi owed me zos. I would take on more shame. Vayisi shafal be'enai. I would be low in my own eyes. V'im ha'amahos asher amart imam ikaveda. And those maidservants you mentioned, with them I would get honor. U'michal bas Shaul lo hayala yaled ad yom mosa. And it concludes, she did not have a child until the day of her death. Yeah. Very hard story. On multiple levels. The problem is that she's not childless. Number one, there's a thing I didn't want to get into here because that would really add too much, which is that there's a pasuk later on that actually describes 5 children of Michal. But that's
She could have had them before.
so it could be before, right? So that's the thing. They're not. That's part of the other part of the problem is that it says that Michal had them from a man by the name of Adriel, who was the husband of her sister Meirav. So the question is, what are you talking about? So the Gemara comes up with an answer and says that Meirav died earlier, and that Michal raised them. And so she's identified as, so to speak, the mother, because that's what we do in Tanakh. The woman who raises them is considered the mother, right? In the same way that Bastia gets credit for raising Moshe, and in the same way that Naomi is considered to be the mother in some sense of Ruth's kids, and Bilhah and Zilpah and Rachel and Leah. Like, that's what we do. In Tanakh, the person who raises is considered the mother. So that's a resolution of that problematic passage. But in any case, the Gemara believes, in source number 7, I brought you the pasuk it's based on, that she actually did have children, and she is the same as the wife of David at the end of source number 7, the 6th wife listed there. Her name is Eglah. Eglah Eshet David. We don't find any woman named Eglah elsewhere. It's not that we know of anyone named Eglah. Eglah is also kind of a funny name to give your kid. Like, once we're into funny names. Eglah is calf. However, as the Gemara says in source number 8, this is Michal. Eglah zu Michal. V'lama nikra shma Eglah. Why was she named Eglah? Shechaviva alav ke'eglah. She was beloved to him like a calf. This is
nicer than cow.
Yes. Agreed. Now we're going to stick with Eglah. Umi havel Michal bani, to which the Gemara says, but wait a minute, that pasuk says that Eglah had a child, Yisraam. V'aksiv Michal batro lo hayala valed ad yom mosa, but we said that she did not have any kids till the day of her death. So Rav Chisda ad yom mosa lo hayala biyom mosa hayala. The answer is she died in childbirth. That's what this medrash is building on. Is the idea that she died that way. Okay, so now we've seen the 3 stories. So now I can ask you the question: what is the common denominator? Why is this medrash telling me, look at that, 3 stories? You look at it and you're just like, and therefore what? Where's the bond? Where's the connection? Trafim somehow, because they show up with Michal and David in some sense.
Well, there is a connection of the Aron.
The Aron, that's right. You have the Aron in the Michal story. You have the Aron in the Pinchas story. You don't have the Aron with Yaakov.
Childbirth.
Right, but then in that case, it's just a random statement.
Yeah.
Look at this. Isn't it interesting that it shows up 3 times? Like, the medrash should be giving me something more than
They
just.
all named. There's a child something after, like, a strange name.
Well, this one, she's the one with the strange name. Although I did think about this possibility because Yisraam is also not a great name. Lehitraim is to complain loudly. The Yisraam, you could say, also refers to some kind of complaint, and then add that to Ben-Oni, if Ben-Oni is son of my suffering, and then Ikavod, lack of honor. So you do have that as a possibility. There's an article by a fellow named Jakubowicz who suggests that that maybe he leaves out the story of Michal and just says maybe the wife of Pinchas is being held up as better than Rachel. Meaning Rachel dies due to the theft of the Trafim, while the wife of Pinchas is righteous. Look at her; she's concerned about the Aron, and that's what upsets her. It's an interesting idea, but doesn't explain this medrash with its set of three.
They all mention their father-in-laws or father, yeah, right.
With Michal, we mentioned Shaul, her father.
Oh yeah, Eli.
With Asher Pinchas, we mentioned the father-in-law, and Rachel's involves Lavan. So the Medrash is telling me, not sure where to go, that having a father or a father-in-law is a risk factor. I don't know. I don't know what to do with it. It's not like they have the same character, right? Eli is good even if he doesn't, educate his kids. Lavan is bad. We're pretty clear on that one. Shaul is good, even if things go wrong. There's an edition of Midrash Rabbah called Midrash Rabbah Mevu'ar, put together by a group of writers who suggest it's simply that all three of them are tzidkaniyot. All three of them are held up as being righteous. Rachel is righteous, the wife of Pinchas is righteous, and Michal bat Shaul, despite her rebuke for David, is also held up as righteous. So three righteous women, and this happens. It's nice, a little dull. I'd be looking for more.
Something with honor?
Sorry?
Something with honor, maybe? The last time we see it.
Honor.
The honor.
You mean the honor of David in Michal's story, and the honor of Hashem and the Aron in the story with the Mishkan and Asher Pinchas, and Rachel.
Trying to bring honor to her father by teaching it
Almost.
But they were
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
save somebody else, right? But Rachel was trying to save. Was she trying? Yeah, she was trying to save Yaakov and her family by
Okay. Yeah.
And with David,
Yeah.
She hid them under the bed.
Because she did save him, right?
So she was, I don't know if it was.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe they're all trying to save someone, but they're,
Like there's a
the way they're doing it is kind of not, like, they're selfless about it, but it ends up being the wrong way to do it.
Essentially, well-meaning
Well-meaning,
activities.
But a bad outcome.
But the middle story doesn't work.
They meant well.
But why do they have to die?
That's interesting. I mean, death as a part of this is problematic. Like, if really that's what you did. But the idea of being well-meaning, I think, is an interesting one. I mean, we definitely see it with Rachel. Whatever it was she was doing, we accept that it was with a good motivation. We just don't know what it was. The issue with taking the Aron out to war, they thought was the right thing to do, even though you're not supposed to.
But Michal saw, like, she was trying to protect.
And Michal's rebuke.
Right. It was well-meaning.
It's an interesting idea. It was well-meaning, and it led to tragedy.
Yes.
Who was writing that story?
I think there's also something similar between the Aron and the Trufim.
Shmuel is writing which part? Sorry.
Story.
You mean the idea that she died in child? Oh, you mean that account?
Did she write to chastise?
Oh, who's right in? I think you said who's writing. Who is right in that story? So the answer seems to be David.
Yeah?
That's the way it's usually taken, is that David is the one who's right. Generally speaking, disgrace yourself and honor God.
Like a king.
Yeah. But Michal in general is right about things, but not in this case. Sorry, Rachel, how you were going to say?
I think that there's something similar between the Aron and the Trufim, because they're both like physical things in this world that have some kind of power to them.
There we go. So Rav Amnon Bazak has an article in which he ignores the Michal story, but he takes on the first two and picks up on that idea. He has an article in a journal called Megadim, which is a great journal. This is Megadim Volume 28. I was going to put the link. You can actually get it online, but I didn't put the link on here. My mistake. If I remember, I'll send it out in the follow-up email. But his argument in an article called Galak Kavod MiYisrael, which is from the psukim that we've read, he highlights a series of similarities between the stories of Rachel and the wife of Pinchas. It's not just that they die in childbirth. With both of them, we're told that the women standing there tell them, "You're going to have a son," right? With the two of them, they name their children for the tragedy. Both of them come after something has been taken from its owner, so to speak, whether it's the Trafim or the Aron. And there's even a Binyamin link, because I mentioned very briefly that the runner who brought news of the taking of the Aron and the death and all that was Ish Binyamin. And of course, Binyamin is the son of Rachel. And he sees a shared mistake. He quotes you the Medrash Tanchuma in source number 9, which I already mentioned in terms of Radak. Lama ganva osam. Why did she steal the trafim? Kedei shelo yehu omrim lelavan sheYaakov boreach im nashav ubanav v'tzonav. So that they wouldn't tell Lavan that Yaakov had run away, taking the view that they're not idols. They have some kind of power to inform of what's going on, whatever that means. I still don't know. Similarly, the Jews of the time of the wife of Pinchas see power in the Aron. Go back to that story that we read in 5, when they took the Aron, and look what happens. After they lose the war the first time, the first 4,000, right? What's their response to it? It's to say, why did Hashem strike us this day? Let's take the Aron from Shiloh, and that way God will save us. What's missing in their reaction?
The reason why they lost the first time.
Yeah, there's no tshuva. It's not like we've done something wrong, God, please help us. It's like we have this neat totem, right? God values the Aron. Let's take it with us, and now we're going to win. It's valuing the object. Exactly. And Barbanel points this out. He gives you 5 reasons why they lost the Aron. His 4th reason that he gives in number 10 is Hasiva Revi'it Lefi Yisrael lo shavu el Hashem v'lo bikshu mimenu tshuva. They didn't return to God. They didn't look for Hashem to rescue them. We've become better. They just figured God must, guard the Aron. And in fact, you find this in Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu, in source number 11, in one of his many, many, many rebukes of the Jews of his day, gives a classic one. He says, Al tivtechu lachem divrei hasheker. Don't trust falsehood. Leimor, heichal Hashem, heichal Hashem, heichal Hashem, hema. People say, the temple will never be destroyed. Beis HaMikdash is always going to be here. It's the sanctuary of God. He says, it doesn't work that way. You have to improve your ways. If you will bring justice between people, then it will be good. And further along in the same paragraph, he says, the middle of the 3rd line, go to my place in Shiloh, where I first dwelled in Israel, where the Mishkan stood for 369 years. See what I did to that. Because they sinned. Sorry, I tried to finish before you had to go.
I know.
Okay. So, he says, see what I did in Shiloh. Meaning, I didn't care about the Aron. It wasn't about the Aron. The people sinned and they put their faith in the Aron then. And lost. And that's what they're doing in Yirmiyahu's days. They're putting faith and saying, well, it's Heichal Hashem. Of course Hashem's never going to let it be destroyed. I don't care what Yirmiyahu says. And his response is, it doesn't work that way. So it's a great link between the first 2 of our 3 stories. Meaning, Rachel's death is tied to people putting faith in human objects. In the Trafim, these human-made objects that have maybe some status, quasi-idol, I don't know. And then the second one is the Aron, and thinking that the Aron is going to save them. But he doesn't address Michal. And also that I'm not so sure that the Medrash Tanchuma in its full text really supports him. Because he's taking the view that they're putting their faith in something that has no power. But that Medrash Tanchuma actually believes that they do have power. Especially if you read the rest of the Medrash that he didn't quote in his article. But yes, I'm not so thrilled with it. But here's a 4th and last idea for what may be going on here. I pointed out in the beginning that Rachel dies young, really in what should be the middle of her story. Her story should have gone on for a very long time afterwards. We should have had, Yaakov and Rachel, well, I was going to say enjoying their old age, but the truth is this, the sale of Yosef probably would have ruined that one. I can't imagine her response to that. So that she wouldn't have to see what happens with Yosef.
Well, you could say the other thing would never have happened because if she was alive, maybe
I don't know.
run into a chin.
She would have said, no, don't go there to go see your brother. Yeah. But what I think you can, what I think you do see with Rachel's death, and with all of these deaths, is that they mark the end of an era, and the birth of a new era. And I think that's the image of them dying in childbirth. Meaning, Rachel, this is the last act of the Avos and Imahos, is production of Binyamin. After this, that's it. Now the Shvatim take over. Your next story is Reuven and Bilhah. that weird story in its own right. And then it lists, these are the sons of Yaakov, and then it lists, these are the descendants of Esav, and then the sale of Yosef and everything else. And Yaakov, he's around, he's going to give a bracha, he's not, not interacting with people. But the drivers of the story from here on out are the Shvatim. This is the end of the era of the Avos and the Imahos. And it's presented as sort of punctuated with Rachel's death. Eshes Pinchas, this is the end of Shiloh. That's it. I mentioned before, 369 years the Aron stood. That's a mind-bogglingly long time when you think about it, right? What did this world look like 369 years ago? Well, that requires you to do math. But you're talking about 1650. Right? The difference between the world of 1650 to the world of 2018.
Oh, well, I think the last few hundred years are the most drastic. It's not fair. You have to go like
that's what we think.
1500 to 1200.
No, that's not true. They had industrialization.
No, we had way more.
I mean, you understand what I'm saying. This was a very long time in which the Jewish world, Jewish life centered around Shiloh, and it comes to an end at this point. Now people can bring their karbanos on bamos, on private altars. It's the decentralization of the Jewish people, which ultimately is going to lead to the Beis HaMikdash, right? Because that's what's going to take its place. Michal bat Shaul represents the end of the house of Shaul. She is one of 4 siblings. Yonatan and Ishbosheth are both already dead. They died in the war when Shaul was killed. Her older sister Meirav predeceases her, as we talked about. She takes over the kids, as the Gemara says. Michal is the last one in the set, and when she dies, it's time for the house of David to take over. Meaning, the last claim of any monarchy from Binyamin is now gone. And so maybe what the Medrash is doing is saying that when the old era passes, it includes within it the seeds of the new one. They died, but in birthing the new era. Take a look at source number 12, which is a Gemara which speaks about this concept. It talks about it with Eli and Shmuel. How Shmuel has prophecy before Eli dies. And it says, Kishemes Rabbi Akiva nolad Rebbe. Rabbi Akiva is, of course, the giant at the end of the second Beis HaMikdash, and the period immediately thereafter. He dies. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is born, the one who's going to canonize Mishnah. Rabbi dies. Rabbi Yehuda is born. Rabbi Yehuda was the Talmud of Rav and Shmuel, who passed along the Torah of the Tanoim into the Amoraim and their time. Kishmeis Rabbi Yehuda nolad Rava. Rava takes over from Rabbi Yehuda. And then Rav Ashi, who seals the Gemara, Ravina and Rav Ashi, he's born before Rava dies. To teach you that there's always a replacement, and that's the idea that with Eli as well, Shmuel starts to prophesy before the flame of Eli, so to speak, is extinguished. So here, each era ends, but there's a new life that starts. I also had a speculative note that I would add to it, and here I have 2 out of 3. I would like to come up with a third, but I don't have a third. But this is now, I think that idea is clear. In other words, I believe that that's what this Medrash is doing. It's trying to show you not just these are 3 women who died, but that the eras are punctuated by their death and childbirth, telling you that there's still provision being made for the next age. But their pregnancy leads to the birth of a major part of the future. Meaning, Rachel dies, but it's Binyamin she's producing. He's actually the completion of the Shvatim. And in many ways, if you think of the sale of Yosef's story, he's a linchpin in terms of how things are going to move forward. Eshet Pinchas dies, right? She has 2 sons. One is Ikavod here. The other one is Achituv, who's going to be mentioned later in Shmuel, who is the ancestor of Eviatar the Kohen Gadol, who will be a key ally to David, and has his own story, ultimately leads to Yirmiyahu, even, as Rav Bazak points out. So their children lead to, major pieces of the next age. I don't know what to do with Yitram and Michal bat Shaul. This one I'm still confounded with. I don't know what to do with that one. No one has anything bad to say about Yitram besides that he was born.
Son doesn't become king.
How come what?
Her son is the oldest, right? She was the first wife. Why is it not?
Whose son? I don't know who you mean. Michal? She's not the first. She's the 6th.
She's the 6th wife?
Yeah. And it depends on whether you mean the first time she's supposed to marry him or when she actually marries him. She's had the story with Palti ben Laish, but she's number 6 on the list here. Yeah. And in any case, he told Bathsheba that Shlomo was going to become king, and Bathsheba doesn't let anything happen that she doesn't want to have happen. That she's also going to be one of the topics for that heroes and villains class.
Yeah, hero or villain.
Yeah.
She's a hero, big time. But yeah. So I'm not sure about this speculation here. We also have among the villains is Atalia. Atalia, the killer queen. Izebel is one of them. Okay, but all right. We did not get to the question of who gets married first. So I don't know. Maybe I'll record something about it and just send out a link to it. We'll see. All right, but thank you very much.
Thank you.